I'm David Martinez. I'm 72 years old and I'm telling you this story from beyond the grave. Yes, you heard that right. I'm currently 6 feet under, but what I'm about to tell you is so important that my voice is rising from the dirt to reach your ears. In the last 6 months of my life, what I learned about my family shook me so deeply that even after death I can't rest peacefully. After 45 years of marriage, I lost my wife. For 25 years, I worked at the Architects Association. I dedicated my life to my family. I wanted the best for my son, Roberto. I gave him a university education, helped him start his business, stood by him when he got married. But what I learned in those final 6 months proved that this love was never reciprocated. Roberto never loved me. He only saw me as an ATM. I had growing suspicions inside me, but I tried to push them away. My son loves me, I convinced myself. He just has a busy life. On the evening of February 28, 2024, my life changed completely. That night, I was waiting for Roberto to come to my house. He had told me, "We need to have an important conversation." While I was preparing coffee in the kitchen, I heard his phone ring. The caller was Isabella, my daughter-in-law. When Roberto answered his phone, I was close enough to hear their conversation. "Baby, is the old man still alive?" Isabella's voice contained no love, only cold calculation. "Yes, he's still alive," Roberto replied, "but the doctor said 6 months at most." 6 months? That's too long. I want that house immediately. I need to sell my apartment in Paris. Be patient, Isabella. When the old man dies, everything will be ours. Roberto, this waiting is driving me crazy. An $8 million house, $2 million bank account, stocks. Have you ever calculated? Over 15 million. My heart stopped. Words coming, from my own son's mouth, about waiting for a man who had been his father for 45 years to die. They weren't just waiting for my death. They were calculating how long my death would take. "Don't worry, darling," Roberto continued. "In 6 months, our lives will completely change. We'll live in that house. You'll set up your studio. Sophia will go to private school." "Roberto, what if the old man changes his will?" "Impossible. I spoke with his lawyer. In his will, everything is left to me. There's some money for Sophia too, but everything else is ours." Isabella's laughter filled my entire house. "Perfect. That old man will finally be useful." My legs started trembling. I sat down on the kitchen chair and realized I couldn't breathe. For 45 years I had raised this boy. I had sacrificed everything for him. I had worked extra shifts to pay for his college. I had given him the down payment for his first house. I had supported him through every crisis, and he was waiting for me to die like I was some kind of business investment. But this was just the beginning. As I stood there in shock, I heard Roberto's footsteps approaching the kitchen. I quickly pretended to be busy with the coffee, my hands shaking as I poured the cups. "Dad?" Roberto said with that fake smile I was beginning to recognize. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible." I looked at my son, this man I had raised from a baby, who had sat on my shoulders at baseball games, who had cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart. The same person who just moments ago had been discussing my death like a stock market investment. "No problem, son," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady. "How's Isabella? And Sophia?" "They're great, Dad. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about." Roberto sat down at the kitchen table, and I noticed how his eyes scanned the room, not with affection, but like he was appraising property. "You know, Dad, Isabella and I have been thinking, this house is really too big for you now that Mom's gone. The maintenance cost must be killing you." I almost laughed at the irony. Maintenance costs. As if he cared about my financial well-being. "I'm managing fine, Roberto. But, Dad, you're 72 years old. What if something happens? What if you fall down those stairs? What if you have a heart attack and no one finds you for days?" His concern sounded so genuine, so loving. If I hadn't heard that phone conversation, I might have been touched by his worry. Instead, I felt sick to my stomach. "Have you thought about maybe downsizing?" Roberto continued. "There are some really nice senior communities nearby, places where you'd have people around, medical care if you need it, activities. You want me to move to a nursing home?" "Not a nursing home, Dad, a community, a place where you'd be safer, happier. And think about it. You could travel. You always wanted to see Europe again. You could take that trip without worrying about this big empty house. Every word was carefully chosen, perfectly delivered. He had probably practiced this speech with Isabella. Maybe they had rehearsed it, planned every argument, every emotional manipulation. And what would happen to the house, I asked, watching his face carefully. Roberto's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Well, we'd have to sell it, of course. But Dad, the money from the sale would more than cover your living expenses for the rest of for many years. You'd never have to worry about money again. For the rest of my life. He had almost said, for the rest of your short life. The words hung in the air between us like a poisonous cloud. I need time to think about it, I said finally. Roberto's smile tightened slightly. Of course, Dad. Take all the time you need. Just don't take too long. At your age, these decisions become more urgent. After Roberto left that night, I sat in my living room, the room where I had celebrated every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone of our family life, the room where I had taught Roberto to play chess, where I had helped him with his homework, where I had given him advice about girls and careers and life, the room he was planning to sell the moment I stopped breathing. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, something I rarely did anymore, and tried to process what I had learned. My son, the boy I had raised and loved unconditionally, saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between him and a fortune. But Roberto had made one crucial mistake in his calculations. He assumed I was the same trusting, naive father I had always been. He assumed I would continue to be blind to his true nature until the day I died. He was wrong. That night I made a decision that would change everything. If Roberto wanted to play games with my life and death, I would show him how the game was really played. But first I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went. The next morning, I called my doctor's office and scheduled an appointment. Not because I was sick, but because I needed to know exactly what Roberto had been told about my health. Dr. Williams had been my physician for over 20 years. He greeted me with his usual warm smile, but I could see concern in his eyes. David, I have to ask, has Roberto been bothering you about your health recently? My blood went cold. What do you mean? Well, he called me last week, asking about your prognosis. He seemed very concerned about your heart condition. My heart condition? Dr. Williams looked confused. David, your last EKG was perfectly normal. Your blood pressure is well controlled with medication. Yes, you're 72, but you're in excellent health for your age. I told Roberto that you could easily live another 10 to 15 years. What exactly did Roberto ask you? He wanted to know if you had any life-threatening conditions. He said he was worried about you living alone and wanted to know if he should be preparing for the worst. The pieces were falling into place. Roberto hadn't just been hoping for my death. He had been actively investigating it. He had called my doctor fishing for information, probably hoping to hear that I was sicker than I appeared. Doctor, if someone called you claiming to be my son and asking about my health, what would you tell them? Well, normally I can't discuss patient information without written consent. But Roberto is listed as your emergency contact, and he seemed genuinely concerned. I told him you were healthy, but I may have mentioned that at your age things can change quickly. Roberto had twisted the doctor's words, used them to feed Isabella's impatience, and probably to justify their planning to themselves. They had turned "things can change quickly" into 6 months at most. I left the doctor's office with a clear mind and a clear plan. Roberto wanted me dead. Fine. I would give him exactly what he wanted, but not in the way he expected. Over the next few weeks, I began to change my routine. I started paying closer attention to Roberto and Isabella's visits, to their conversations, to the way they looked at my house and my belongings. What I discovered sickened me. Isabella would walk through my home like she was conducting an inventory. She would touch my furniture, examine my artwork, and I caught her measuring rooms with her eyes. During one visit, I found her in my bedroom, going through my wife's jewelry box. "Oh, David," she said when she saw me. "These pieces are so beautiful. Maria had such exquisite taste." "Those belong to my wife," I said quietly. Of course. I was just admiring them. You know, when you're gone, these pieces shouldn't just sit in a box. They should be worn, appreciated. I think Maria would want that when I'm gone. Not if I die, not if something happens to me. When I'm gone. As if my death was a scheduled event on their calendar. But it was Sophia, my 16-year-old granddaughter, who delivered the most devastating blow. One afternoon, she was at my house doing homework while her parents attended some business meeting. I was in the kitchen when I heard her talking on the phone to a friend. "Yeah, we're moving to a huge house soon," she said excitedly. "My grandpa's house. It's like a mansion. My parents say it'll be ours when he dies." "When he dies?" her friend asked. I could hear the voice through the phone. "Yeah, he's really old and sick. My dad says it won't be long now, maybe 6 months. Then we'll be rich." My granddaughter, the little girl I had taught to ride a bike, who I had taken to Disneyland every birthday, who called me Papa and told me she loved me, was celebrating my impending death like it was Christmas morning. I walked back to my study and closed the door. For the first time since my wife died, I cried, not tears of sadness, but tears of rage and betrayal. They had poisoned even my granddaughter against me. But then something else took over, something cold and calculating, something that came from 25 years of designing buildings, of understanding how to construct things that would last, how to plan for every contingency. I called my lawyer. "Thomas," I said when he answered, "I need to see you immediately, and I need you to prepare for the most complex legal project of your career." Thomas Mitchell had handled my legal affairs for 15 years. He was discreet, brilliant, and completely trustworthy. When I told him what I had discovered about Roberto and Isabella, he was shocked but not surprised. "I've seen this before, David," he said sadly. "Adult children who see their parents as retirement plans. It's more common than you'd think. Thomas, I want to change my will, but I don't want to just disinherit Roberto. I want to teach him a lesson he'll never forget." "What do you have in mind?" "I want you to help me create the most elaborate, most devastating legal revenge in the history of estate planning." Thomas leaned back in his chair and smiled for the first time since I'd walked into his office. "Now you're speaking my language." Over the next 3 months, Thomas and I worked together to create what he called a masterpiece of legal retribution. But we weren't just changing my will. We were orchestrating a complete financial and social destruction of Roberto and Isabella's lives. First, we created a false will, one that Roberto would find and believe to be real. This fake will left everything to him, just as he expected. Thomas filed it with the probate court and made sure Roberto's contacts in the legal community would confirm its existence if he asked. Meanwhile, we created the real will, a document so complex and devastating that Thomas called it the nuclear option. But changing my will was just the beginning. I was about to embark on the most satisfying months of my entire life. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every visit, every casual comment about my death was recorded on a small device Thomas had given me. I took photos of Isabella examining my belongings, videos of her measuring rooms, audio recordings of Roberto discussing my deteriorating health with insurance agents. Yes, insurance agents. I discovered that Roberto had taken out life insurance, policies on me, policies I had never signed, with forged signatures that somehow looked remarkably like my handwriting. When I confronted him about it, he laughed it off. "Dad, it's just financial planning. If something happens to you, we want to make sure we can afford to give you a proper funeral." A proper funeral, with 3 different life insurance policies, totaling $2 million in addition to my estate. But my favorite discovery came when I hired a private investigator to follow Roberto and Isabella. What I learned explained so much about their sudden interest in my mortality. Roberto's real estate business was failing, badly. He owed over $800,000 to various creditors and was facing bankruptcy within 6 months. Isabella's fashion line had never taken off, and she owed another $300,000 in business loans. They were drowning in debt, and my death was their only lifeline. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They desperately needed me to die. This knowledge gave me incredible power. I could play with them, manipulate them, Watch them squirm while they tried to hide their desperation. I started dropping hints about my declining health. I would mention feeling dizzy, having chest pains, feeling weak. Roberto and Isabella would exchange those quick glances they thought I couldn't see, glances full of hope and anticipation. "Dad, maybe you should see Dr. Williams again," Roberto would say with fake concern. "You've been looking tired lately." "I think I'm just getting old, son. We all have our time." "Don't talk like that, Dad. You've got years left in you." But his eyes told a different story. His eyes were calculating how many weeks, how many days. I also started pretending to be more forgetful, more confused. I would ask the same questions twice, forget where I put things, act like I couldn't remember how to use simple appliances. "Papa, are you okay?" Sophia asked one day when I pretended to forget her name for a moment. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Sometimes. My mind isn't as sharp as it used to be." I watched Roberto and Isabella exchange another look. They were probably thinking about accelerating their timeline, but the most satisfying part was watching Isabella's increasing boldness. As she became more confident that my death was imminent, she stopped pretending to respect me. She would rearrange furniture to make it safer for you, David. She would throw away my belongings because you don't need so much clutter. She even had the audacity to bring interior designers to my house to plan some updates. "Don't you think these updates can wait until after?" I asked innocently. "Oh no, David. We want you to enjoy the improvements while you're still—" She caught herself. "While you're still here to appreciate them. While I'm still alive." She had almost said it out loud. The final piece of evidence I needed came during a dinner party Roberto and Isabella hosted at my house. They had invited several of their friends, people I had never met, but who apparently knew all about their inheritance expectations. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, but instead listened from the hallway as the conversation continued without me. "So, when do you think you'll be able to move in permanently?" one of their friends asked. "Probably by Christmas," Isabella said casually. "David's health is deteriorating quickly." "That's so sad," another friend said. "But what an amazing house you'll inherit. You're so lucky." "Lucky?" Roberto laughed. "Do you know how long we've been waiting for this? Isabella's been planning renovations for 2 years. She has the entire house redesigned in her head." "2 years?" someone asked. "Oh yes," Isabella said. "Ever since Maria died, we knew it was just a matter of time. David can't maintain this place alone. And at his age, with his health issues—" "What health issues?" the friend asked. Roberto and Isabella exchanged a look. "Heart problems," Roberto said. "The doctors say he could go at any time. They had been planning my death and their inheritance for 2 years. Ever since my wife died, they had been circling like vultures, waiting for their opportunity. But what they didn't know was that every word of that conversation was being recorded by devices Thomas had hidden throughout the house. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my study and listened to the recordings. 2 years of planning. 2 years of pretending to love me while calculating my net worth. 2 years of fake concern while hoping for my death. I had all the evidence I needed. Now it was time to execute the plan. The next morning, I called Dr. Williams and asked him to meet me at his office for an unusual consultation. "Doctor, I need you to help me die." His face went white. "David, if you're having thoughts of suicide—" "No, doctor. I need you to help me fake my death." Dr. Williams stared at me like I had lost my mind. "David, what you're suggesting is impossible and illegal. I could lose my medical license." "Hear me out, doctor. I'm not asking you to break the law. I'm asking you to help me expose criminals who are actively planning my murder." I showed him all the evidence Thomas and I had collected, the insurance policies with forged signatures, the recordings of Roberto and Isabella discussing my death timeline, the financial investigation showing their desperate debt situation. "My God," Dr. Williams whispered as he listened to the recordings. "They're actually planning to kill you?" "I believe so, and I think they're going to do it soon. Roberto's business creditors are demanding payment, and Isabella's debts are mounting. They can't wait much longer." Dr. Williams was quiet for a long moment. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to fake a heart attack. You pronounce me dead, but instead of going to the morgue, I go into hiding. Then we watch what Roberto and Isabella do when they think I'm dead. David, even if I agreed to this insane plan, how would we explain your sudden recovery? We wouldn't. Once I have enough evidence to destroy them completely, I'll stay dead legally and start a new life somewhere else. But first, I want to watch them celebrate my death. I want to see their true faces when they think they've won. It took 3 more meetings, but Dr. Williams finally agreed to help. The plan was complex, but achievable. I would fake a massive heart attack at home. Dr. Williams would respond to the emergency call and pronounce me dead. But instead of the normal protocol, he would arrange for a specific funeral home, one owned by Thomas's brother-in-law, to handle my body. I would be hidden in a secret room at the funeral home, watching everything through hidden cameras while Roberto and Isabella planned my funeral and fought over my inheritance. But first, I needed to set the stage. I began complaining about chest pains and shortness of breath. I made appointments with Dr. Williams where I described symptoms of heart disease. I made sure Roberto was present for some of these visits. "Dad, you're scaring me," Roberto said after one particularly convincing performance. "Maybe you should consider moving in with us, just until your health stabilizes." "No, son, I want to stay in my own home. If something happens to me, I want it to be here, where I was happy with your mother." I could see the wheels turning in Roberto's head. If I died at home, it would be easier to claim it was natural causes. If I died while living with them, there might be questions. "Well, at least let us check on you more often," Isabella suggested. "Maybe we should have keys made so we can get in if you don't answer the door." They wanted keys to my house. Perfect. I had spare keys made and gave them to Roberto, but what they didn't know was that Thomas had installed hidden cameras throughout the house. Every room was monitored. Every conversation would be recorded. The final piece of the plan required the most acting of my life. I needed to make my heart attack look completely genuine. Thomas hired a makeup artist who worked in Hollywood special effects. She taught me how to simulate the physical symptoms of a heart attack: the pale skin, the sweating, the labored breathing. We practiced for hours until I could fake a convincing medical emergency. On November 15th, 2024, exactly 6 months after I had overheard Roberto and Isabella's first conversation about my death, I decided it was time to die. That morning, I called Roberto and told him I wasn't feeling well. "My chest feels tight and I'm having trouble breathing. Dad, do you want me to take you to the hospital?" No, I just need to rest. Maybe you could come by this evening to check on me." "Of course, Dad. Isabella and I will bring dinner." Perfect. They would be there to witness my death. I spent the day making final preparations. I wrote letters to be delivered after my death. Letters that would destroy Roberto and Isabella's reputations in their social circle. I made sure all my evidence was secure with Thomas. I even recorded a final video message that would be played at exactly the right moment. At 6 p.m., Roberto and Isabella arrived with Chinese takeout. Sophia was with them, which broke my heart a little, but I knew that what I was about to do would ultimately save her from growing up with parents who were murderers. "Papa, you look terrible," Sophia said when she saw me. For a moment, I almost called off the entire plan. The genuine concern in her voice reminded me of the sweet little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to read her stories. But then I heard Isabella whisper to Roberto, "He really does look awful. Maybe tonight's the night. Tonight's the night." They were hoping I would die tonight. We ate dinner together and I made sure to appear increasingly uncomfortable. I clutched my chest occasionally, complained about feeling dizzy, and excused myself to go to the bathroom where I applied the special makeup that made me look pale and sweaty. "Dad, you're really scaring me," Roberto said when I returned to the dining room. But his eyes were bright with anticipation, not fear. "I think I need to lie down," I said, gripping the edge of the table dramatically. "Papa, let me help you," Sophia offered, jumping up from her chair. "No, sweetheart. I just need a moment." I walked slowly toward the living room, then stopped suddenly and grabbed my chest. "Oh God," I gasped, falling to my knees. I can't breathe." What happened next revealed everything I needed to know about my family. Sophia screamed and ran to me. "Papa, Papa, what's wrong?" Roberto pulled out his phone, but instead of calling 911, he called Isabella over. "Look at him," he whispered. "This might be it." Isabella actually smiled. For a split second, before she remembered Sophia was watching, Isabella smiled. "Roberto, call 911. Sophia was crying, trying to help me up. Yes, of course," Roberto said, finally dialing. But he spoke to the operator in a calm, controlled voice. Not like a man whose father was dying, but like someone reporting a scheduled event. I collapsed completely, using all my acting skills to simulate a massive heart attack. The makeup made me look grey and lifeless. I controlled my breathing to make it appear shallow and irregular. Dr. Williams arrived with the ambulance crew, paramedics who were part of our plan. They went through the motions of trying to revive. Meanwhile, Dr. Williams performed a fake examination. "I'm sorry," Dr. Williams announced after several tense minutes. "He's gone." Sophia's scream of anguish was real and heartbreaking. She threw herself on my body, sobbing, "Papa, no, please don't. Leave me." Roberto put his arm around her, but over her head I could see him mouth to Isabella, "We did it. We did it." As if they had accomplished something together. As if my death was a team effort. Isabella was trying to look sad, but she kept glancing around the house with satisfaction. Her eyes lingered on expensive artwork, antique furniture, the grand piano I had bought for my wife's birthday 20 years ago. The paramedics loaded my body onto a stretcher and took me to the waiting ambulance. As planned, instead of going to the hospital, we went directly to Peaceful Rest Funeral Home, where Thomas's brother-in-law, Marcus, was waiting. For the next hour, I was officially dead. Marcus helped me out of the body bag and led me to a hidden room behind his office. The room was equipped with monitors showing feeds from all the cameras in my house. "Are you sure you want to watch this?" Marcus asked. "Sometimes it's better not to know what people really think about you." "I need to see everything," I said. "I need to understand exactly who I raised." What I saw on those monitors for the rest of the night was the most devastating and revealing footage of my entire life. Roberto and Isabella returned to my house after Sophia went home with her friend's family. The moment they were alone, their masks came off completely. "I can't believe it finally happened," Isabella said, literally dancing around my living room. "We're free. We're rich." Roberto opened a bottle of my most expensive wine, a 1985 Bordeaux I had been saving for a special occasion. "To the old man," he said, raising his glass. "Thanks for finally doing us a favor." They clinked glasses and drank a toast to my death. But it got worse. Isabella immediately began making phone calls to interior designers. "Hi, this is Isabella Martinez. Yes, we discussed the renovation project for the Laurel Canyon house. Well, the owner just passed away and we're inheriting it. I want to start immediately." She was calling contractors to remodel my house before my body was even cold. Roberto was on his phone with insurance companies. "Yes, I need to report a death and file a claim. David Martinez, policy numbers." He had all the information memorized. They spent the entire night going through my belongings like scavengers. Isabella tried on my wife's jewelry, modeling pieces in front of the mirror. Roberto went through my desk, looking for bank statements and investment documents. "Look at this," Isabella said, holding up a diamond necklace I had given my wife for our 25th anniversary. "This has to be worth at least 50,000. I'm wearing this to the funeral." "Wear whatever you want," Roberto said. "It's all ours." Now, they discussed selling some of my artwork immediately, before the estate went through probate. They argued about which pieces to keep and which to auction. They planned to convert my study into Isabella's design studio, but the most chilling moment came when Roberto found the folder containing my medical records. "Look at this," he said to Isabella. "The old man wasn't even that sick. Dr. Williams said he could have lived another 10 years. 10 years? Isabella looked horrified. "Thank God he had that heart attack when he did. I couldn't have waited 10 more years. "Yeah," Roberto agreed. "We got lucky. Though if we had waited much longer, we might have had to help things along. Help things along." They were discussing murdering me as casually as choosing what to have for breakfast. I watched them until dawn, documenting their every move, their every callous comment. By morning, I had enough evidence to destroy them completely. But I wasn't done yet. The next phase of my plan required perfect timing and theatrical drama that would make Shakespeare proud. Over the next 3 days, while I remained hidden at the funeral home, Roberto and Isabella planned my funeral. But they weren't planning a memorial service for a beloved father and grandfather. They were planning a celebration of their new wealth. Isabella spent thousands of dollars on a new black dress and shoes for the funeral. "I need to look the part of the grieving daughter-in-law," she told the salesperson, "but also sophisticated. Important people will be there." Roberto hired the most expensive catering company in the city for the reception after the funeral. "Nothing but the best," he told them. "My father would have wanted it that way. My father would have wanted it that way." The lies came so easily to him. They invited over 200 people to the funeral. Not because I had 200 close friends, but because Roberto wanted to impress his business contacts. He saw my funeral as a networking opportunity. The most heartbreaking part was watching Sophia. My granddaughter was genuinely devastated by my death. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, spent hours crying in her room. Roberto and Isabella were so focused on their inheritance that they barely comforted her. "Sophia needs to get over this," Isabella said when Roberto mentioned their daughter's grief. "Death is part of life. She's being dramatic." Sophia was being dramatic? A 16-year-old girl mourning her grandfather was being dramatic? But Sophia also revealed something that made my heart sing with pride. She had loved me genuinely. Her grief was real. Her memories of me were precious to her. In all this darkness, my granddaughter was the one bright light. 2 days before the funeral, Thomas came to visit me at the funeral home. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked. "Once we execute the final phase, there's no going back. Roberto and Isabella will be completely destroyed." "Thomas, I've watched them celebrate my death for 3 days. I've seen them planning to steal from my estate before my body is even buried. I've heard them discuss murdering me as if it were a business decision. They deserve everything that's coming to them." "And Sophia?" That was the hardest part. "Sophia will be hurt initially, but she'll be better off without parents who are criminals. I've made arrangements for her future, arrangements that Roberto and Isabella know nothing about." Thomas nodded. "Then let's finish this." The funeral was scheduled for Saturday morning at 10 a.m. The plan was for me to remain dead until the reading of the will immediately after the service. That's when I would make my grand entrance and reveal the truth about everything. But Roberto and Isabella had their own surprise planned for the funeral. On Friday night, I watched through the cameras as they met with a man I didn't recognize in my house. The conversation was held in whispers, but our audio equipment picked up every word. "Are you sure this will work?" Roberto asked the stranger. "Absolutely. The fire will start in the electrical box in the basement. Old houses like this, it happens all the time. By the time the fire department arrives, there won't be much left." My blood went cold. They were planning to burn down my house. "And the insurance?" Isabella asked. "Full coverage for electrical fires. You'll get the full value of the house, 8 million, plus the contents insurance. Another 2 million at least." "When?" Roberto asked. "Tomorrow night, after the funeral. While everyone thinks you're home grieving, the house mysteriously catches fire. You and Isabella will be at a hotel with perfect alibis. They were going to commit insurance fraud on top of everything else. They wanted to collect my life insurance, inherit my estate, and collect insurance money for burning down my house. But there was one more thing they discussed that made me realize just how evil they had become." "What about the old man's ashes?" Isabella asked. "What about them?" "Well, if the house burns down, we can claim his ashes were lost in the fire. No one will ever know he wasn't really cremated." Roberto laughed. "Perfect. We get rid of all the evidence, and no one can ever prove he wasn't in that urn. They were planning to fake cremating my body while committing arson. They had thought of everything. But so had I. Saturday morning arrived grey and drizzly. Perfect weather for a funeral. From my hiding place, I could see the parking lot of the funeral home filling with cars. Roberto and Isabella had invited everyone they knew, plus many people they wanted to impress. At exactly 10 a.m. the funeral service began. I watched on a monitor. as Roberto stood at the podium to deliver the eulogy for the father he had tried to rob and potentially murder. "My father was a man of great integrity," Roberto said, his voice breaking with fake emotion. "He taught me the value of hard work, the importance of family, and the meaning of unconditional love." The irony was suffocating. Roberto was giving a beautiful speech about values he had never learned and love he had never felt. "David Martinez was not just my father," Roberto continued. "He was my hero, my role model, my best friend. He supported me through every challenge, celebrated every success, and loved me without condition or reservation." Isabella dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, the perfect picture of a grieving daughter-in-law. "She was wearing my wife's diamond necklace, the one she had stolen from my house 3 nights ago. Several people spoke about me during the service. My former colleagues from the architecture firm, neighbors, friends from church. Their words were genuine and touching. They spoke of my kindness, my generosity, my dedication to family. If only they knew that the family I had dedicated my life to was planning to dance on my grave." After the service, everyone moved to the reception hall. For lunch, Roberto had spared no expense: premium catering, open bar, floral arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Dad would have wanted us to celebrate his life properly," Roberto told the guests. "He always said that funerals should be celebrations, not just mourning." I had never said any such thing, but Roberto needed to justify the lavish expense somehow. At 2 p.m., Thomas stood up and addressed the crowd. "Before we conclude today's service, I need to read David Martinez's last will and testament, as requested in his final instructions." This was it. The moment I had been planning for months. Roberto and Isabella exchanged confident glances. They knew what was in the will, or at least they thought they did. Thomas began reading from the fake will we had created. "I, David Martinez, being of sound mind and body, do hereby leave my entire estate to my beloved son Roberto Martinez." Roberto's smile grew wider with each word. Isabella squeezed his hand. Some of the guests murmured approvingly about Roberto inheriting his father's legacy. But then Thomas stopped reading and looked up at the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must interrupt this reading with some shocking news. 3 days ago, we received new information that changes everything. It appears that David Martinez may have been the victim of a conspiracy to steal his estate." Roberto went pale. "What are you talking about?" "Roberto, we have evidence that you and your wife Isabella took out life insurance policies on your father without his knowledge, using forged signatures." "That's impossible," Isabella said, but her voice was shaking. Thomas continued. "We also have recordings of conversations where you discussed your father's death as a financial opportunity, and where you plan to accelerate his death if necessary." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Roberto stood up, knocking over his chair. "This is outrageous. Where is this so-called evidence?" "The evidence," said a familiar voice from the back of the room, "is right here." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was me, David Martinez. Supposedly dead for 3 days, walking into my own funeral reception. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The silence in that reception hall stretched for what felt like an eternity. 200 people stared at me as if they were seeing a ghost, which in a way they were. Roberto's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, shock, disbelief, and finally pure terror. Isabella actually stumbled backward, grabbing onto a table for support. Several guests gasped audibly. One elderly woman fainted and had to be helped to a chair. But it was Sophia's reaction that nearly broke my resolve. My granddaughter let out a scream of joy and ran toward me, tears streaming down her face. "Papa, Papa, you're alive!" She threw herself into my arms, sobbing with relief and happiness. For a moment, holding my granddaughter, I almost regretted putting her through this pain. But then I remembered why I had done it: to save her from growing up with parents who were criminals and murderers. "Hello, Sophia," I said softly, stroking her hair. "I'm sorry I had to put you through this." Over her shoulder, I could see Roberto and Isabella frozen in place, their minds struggling to process what was happening. The other guests were buzzing with confused conversation. "How is this possible?" someone called out. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" Another person demanded. Thomas stepped forward and addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know this is shocking, but David Martinez faked his death in order to expose a criminal conspiracy against him. What you're about to hear will explain everything." I gently separated myself from Sophia and walked to the front of the room. Every eye in the place was on me. Roberto and Isabella looked like they wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Thomas had positioned security guards at all the exits. 3 months ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. I discovered that my son Roberto and his wife Isabella were planning my death. Not just hoping for it, not just waiting for it, but actively planning it. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Roberto found his voice. "Dad, what are you talking about? You're clearly having some kind of mental breakdown." "Am I?" I pulled out a small recording device. "Let me play something for everyone." I pressed play and Roberto's voice filled the room. "When the old man dies, we're going to be rich. This property is worth a fortune." Then Isabella's voice. "Roberto, this waiting is driving me crazy. An $8 million house, $2 million bank account, stocks, over $15 million. The gasps from the crowd were audible. Several people looked at Roberto and Isabella with disgust. That's taken out of context," Roberto stammered. "Is it?" I played another recording. This time it was Isabella saying, "I want that house immediately. I need to sell my apartment in Paris," and Roberto responding, "When the old man dies, everything will be ours." The room was completely silent except for the sound of the recordings. I could see some of Roberto's business associates slowly moving away from him, their faces full of revulsion. "But that's not all," I continued. "Thomas, would you please show everyone the insurance policies?" Thomas projected documents onto a screen at the front of the room. "These are 3 life insurance policies taken out on David Martinez. The signatures on these policies are forgeries. Roberto and Isabella took out $2 million in coverage on a man who never consented to these policies." Isabella finally found her voice. "You can't prove those signatures are forged." "Actually, I can." I held up my hand, showing a small bandage on my finger. "I gave the FBI a fingerprint sample yesterday. Forensic analysis will prove that I never touched those documents, but more importantly, I have video evidence of you forging my signature." Thomas nodded to someone in the back of the room, and suddenly more screens descended from the ceiling. "These are surveillance cameras that were secretly installed in David's house. What you're about to see was recorded 3 weeks ago." The video showed Isabella sitting at my kitchen table, practicing my signature on a piece of paper. She had a sample of my real signature next to her and was carefully copying it over and over. Then the video showed her signing the insurance documents with the forged signature. "My God," someone in the crowd whispered. "They really were planning to kill him." Roberto was sweating now, his expensive suit damp with perspiration. "This is all circumstantial. You can't prove we were actually going to hurt him." "Can't I?" I smiled coldly. "Thomas, please play the recording from yesterday evening." A new audio file began to play. It was the conversation Roberto and Isabella had with the arsonist, planning to burn down my house after the funeral. Roberto's voice. "Are you sure this will work?" The arsonist. "The fire will start in the electrical box. Old houses like this. It happens all the time." Isabella's voice. "And the insurance." The arsonist. "Full coverage, you'll get the full value, $8 million, plus contents insurance." By now several people in the crowd were pulling out their phones, either to call the police or to record this incredible scene. Roberto and Isabella looked like trapped animals. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the crowd, "you've just heard. My son and daughter-in-law planning arson and insurance fraud. But there's more, Thomas. Please show them the medical records." Thomas projected my recent medical exam results. Contrary to what Roberto told many people, David Martinez is in excellent health. His doctor estimates he could easily live another 10 to 15 years. Roberto deliberately lied about his father's health to justify their urgency in acquiring his inheritance. Dr. Williams stepped forward from the crowd. I had asked him to attend the funeral to provide medical testimony if needed. I can confirm, Dr. Williams said, that Roberto called my office repeatedly asking about David's life expectancy. When I told him David was healthy, Roberto seemed disappointed. The crowd was getting restless. Some people were angry, others were fascinated by the drama, but most were simply horrified by what they were learning about Roberto and Isabella. But the most damning evidence, I continued, is what happened during the 3 days I was supposedly dead. Thomas activated more screens, showing highlights from the surveillance footage of Roberto and Isabella's behavior after my fake death. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Roberto and Isabella celebrated with champagne, tried on my wife's jewelry, and called contractors to remodel my house. When the footage showed Isabella dancing around my living room saying, "We're free, we're rich," several people in the crowd made disgusted sounds, but the final piece of footage was the most devastating. It showed Roberto and Isabella going through my belongings like scavengers, discussing which items to sell immediately and which to keep. "Look at this," Isabella's voice said on the recording, holding up my wife's diamond necklace. "This has to be worth at least 50,000. I'm wearing this to the funeral." The camera zoomed in on Isabella's neck. She was wearing that exact necklace at this very moment. "Isabella," I said, pointing at her, "you're wearing my dead wife's jewelry to my funeral. Jewelry you stole from my house 3 days ago." Isabella's hand flew to her throat, instinctively, touching the necklace. The gesture was an admission of guilt that everyone in the room could see. Roberto made one last desperate attempt to control the situation. "This is insane. Dad, you've obviously had some kind of breakdown. You faked your own death. That's not the action of a sane person, isn't it?" I looked around the room at all the faces staring at me. "Ladies and gentlemen, what would you do if you discovered your own children were planning to murder you for money? Would you go to the police with suspicions and recordings that might not be enough to convict them? Or would you gather irrefutable proof of their intentions?" The crowd murmured agreement. Several people nodded approvingly. "Everything I did was legal," I continued. "I worked with my lawyer and my doctor to create a situation where Roberto and Isabella would reveal their true intentions. And they did, spectacularly." Thomas stepped forward again. "I should mention that the FBI has been monitoring this entire operation. They're particularly interested in the insurance fraud and the planned arson." As if on cue, federal agents entered the reception hall from multiple entrances. The crowd parted as agents in FBI jackets walked toward Roberto and Isabella. "Roberto Martinez and Isabella Martinez," the lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, identity theft, forgery, and conspiracy to commit arson." Roberto's legs gave out, and he collapsed into a chair. Isabella tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The agents quickly handcuffed both of them. "This isn't over," Roberto screamed as they led him away. "You're my father. You can't do this to your own son." I walked up to him, close enough to look directly into his eyes. "You stopped being my son the moment you started planning my death. I don't have a son anymore." The pain in Roberto's eyes was real, but it was too late, far too late. As they were being led away, Isabella turned back to scream at me. "You ruined everything. We needed that money. Roberto's business is failing. We're going to lose everything." "You already lost everything," I replied calmly. "You lost it the moment you decided. My life was worth less than your debts." After Roberto and Isabella were taken away, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Many people came up to me to express their shock and support. Several of Roberto's business associates apologized for not seeing through his lies. But the most important conversation was with Sophia. My granddaughter was confused and hurt, struggling to understand what had happened. "Papa, why did my parents want to hurt you?" I sat down with her in a quiet corner of the reception hall. "Sophia, your parents made some very bad choices. They let money become more important than family, more important than love, more important than doing what's right. But they're my parents. What's going to happen to me?" This was the conversation I had been dreading most. "Sophia, I've made arrangements for your future. You're going to live with your Aunt Maria in San Diego. She's excited to have you, and you'll be able to finish high school there." Maria was my late wife's sister, a wonderful woman who had always loved Sophia like her own daughter. But what about college? What about my future? I smiled and took her hands. Sophia, I've set up a trust fund for you. You'll have enough money for college, graduate school if you want it, and to start your adult life comfortably. You'll never have to worry about money the way your parents did. How much? $5 million. It's yours when you turn 21, but Maria will have access to funds for your education and living expenses before then. Sophia's eyes widened. Papa, that's incredible. But what about you? Where will you live? I had been thinking about this for months. I'm going to sell this house and move to a smaller place. Maybe travel a little. I'm 72 years old, Sophia. It's time for me to enjoy life instead of just surviving it. Over the next few weeks, the legal proceedings moved quickly. Roberto and Isabella were charged with multiple federal crimes. The evidence against them was overwhelming. My recordings, the surveillance footage, the forged insurance documents, and testimony from the arsonist they had hired, who turned out to be an undercover FBI agent. Roberto's business collapsed completely. When his criminal charges became public, Isabella lost her fashion line when her business partners discovered she was facing prison time. Their house was foreclosed, their assets were frozen, and their social circle abandoned them completely. The trial was a media sensation. The story of a father who faked his own death to expose his children's murder plot captured the public's imagination. I testified for 2 full days, presenting all the evidence Thomas and I had collected. Roberto's defense attorney tried to paint me as a vindictive old man who had manipulated the situation to destroy his own family. But the jury wasn't buying it. The evidence was too clear, too overwhelming. Roberto was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit arson, and identity theft. Isabella received 12 years for her role in the conspiracy. During the sentencing hearing, Roberto made one final plea. Your Honor, this man is my father. He raised me, loved me, and taught me everything I know about life. I may have made mistakes, but destroying your own child isn't justice. The judge's response was swift and harsh. Mr. Martinez, you and your wife spent months planning your father's death for financial gain. You took out fraudulent insurance policies. You planned to commit arson. You celebrated when you thought he was dead. The court finds your actions to be among the most callous and calculating we've ever seen. The fact that the victim was your own father makes your crimes even more despicable. After the sentencing, reporters swarmed me outside the courthouse. I had prepared a brief statement. For 45 years, I loved my son unconditionally. I sacrificed everything to give him the best life possible. I would have given him everything I owned if he had simply asked. But he chose to plan my murder instead. I don't take any pleasure in seeing him go to prison, but I sleep better knowing that other elderly parents are safer because these predators are off the streets. One reporter asked if I would ever forgive Roberto. Forgiveness isn't something you give to people who aren't sorry for what they've done. Roberto is only sorry he got caught. If I had actually died of a heart attack that night, he and Isabella would have collected millions of dollars and never felt a moment's remorse. That's not someone who deserves forgiveness. 6 months after the trial, I sold my house for $12 million, $4 million more than Roberto and Isabella had thought it was worth. The buyer was a young family with 3 children who would fill it with laughter and love again. I bought a beautiful condominium overlooking the ocean and waves. Santa Barbara. It's smaller than my old house, but it's perfect for me. I have a home office where I do some consulting work for young architects. I have a garden where I grow vegetables. I have a balcony where I drink my morning coffee and watch the sunrise over the Pacific. Sophia visits me every weekend. She's thriving in San Diego with Maria. Her grades are excellent, she's made new friends, and she's starting to talk about wanting to study architecture in college. She wants to carry on the family tradition, the real family tradition of building things that last, not the twisted tradition Roberto created of destroying things for money. Papa, she said during one of her visits, do you miss my dad at all? It was a hard question, but she deserved an honest answer. I miss the little boy I thought I was raising. I miss the son I thought I had. But I don't miss Roberto the man because I realize now that the person I thought he was never really existed. Do you think he'll ever change? In prison, I mean. I hope so, Sophia. For his sake, not mine. Prison gives people time to think about their choices. Maybe Roberto will use that time to become the man I always hoped he could be. But honestly, I don't think he will. Some people are fundamentally broken, and Roberto was broken in a way that made him see other people, even his own father, as objects to be used rather than humans to be loved. 1 year after my death, I received a letter from Roberto in prison. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was exactly what I expected, a manipulative attempt to make me feel guilty for his situation. He wrote about how prison was difficult, how other inmates treated him badly when they learned about his crimes, how he had been falsely accused of planning my murder. He ended the letter by saying he forgave me for destroying his life and that he hoped we could reconcile when he was released. I wrote back a single sentence: "You destroyed your own life the moment you decided mine was worth less than money." I never heard from him again. Isabella tried a different approach. She had her mother call me, begging me to write a letter to the parole board supporting early release. Isabella's mother claimed that Isabella had learned her lesson and was a changed person. I politely declined. "Your daughter celebrated my death with champagne. She danced around my living room with joy because she thought I was dead. She stole my wife's jewelry and wore it to my funeral. These aren't the actions of someone who made a mistake. These are the actions of someone who is fundamentally lacking in human empathy. Today, 3 years after my death, I'm healthier and happier than I've been in decades. I have real friends now, people who value me for who I am, not what I might leave them in my will. I volunteer at a legal aid clinic, helping other elderly people protect themselves from financial abuse. I've learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about love, loyalty, and respect. Sophia is my family, Maria is my family, my new friends are my family. Roberto and Isabella were never really family. They were just people who shared my name and my house. The saddest part of this entire story isn't that Roberto and Isabella went to prison. The saddest part is that if they had simply loved me, really loved me, they would have inherited everything anyway. I was planning to leave them my entire estate because I thought they cared about me. Their greed destroyed the very thing they were trying to steal. But their loss was my gain in an unexpected way. Staging my own death showed me what people really thought about me. I got to hear my own eulogy, see who genuinely mourned my passing, and witness the true character of everyone around me. Most people never get that opportunity. Most people die. Without knowing who really loved them and who was just pretending, I'm one of the lucky ones. I got to die and live to tell about it. And the lesson I learned is this: if someone only loves you for what you can give them, they don't love you at all. Real love doesn't count down the days until you die. Real love doesn't calculate your net worth. Real love doesn't plan your funeral before you're sick. Real love grieves when you're gone and celebrates when you're alive. Roberto and Isabella taught me the difference between the two, and for that twisted lesson, I suppose I should thank them. But I won't. Some lessons are too expensive to be grateful for. If you've listened to this story, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey of betrayal and revenge, I want you to remember one thing. Love isn't always returned the way we give it. But that doesn't mean we should stop loving. It just means we should be more careful about who we love. And if you're an older person with adult children who seem suddenly interested in your health, your living situation, or your finances, pay attention. Ask questions. Trust your instincts. And maybe, just maybe, consider faking your own death to find out who your real family is. It worked for me.